And with that, Robert Husman, if you could turn on your video and we'll get you going. There he is.
How's this, Bernie? Yeah, thank you so much.
Nice seeing you.
Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much for taking your time, and grateful to listen in on some of these candidate interviews as you all have over the last few weeks. My name is Robert Husman. I am on the ballot for Keizer City Council, position number 5. I'm told I'm currently running unopposed, but as we know in life, there is no such thing as unopposed. There's always somebody out there. So every vote truly counts. And we know that in elections such as Christina's, which are statewide, as well as in the local elections, every single vote matters, which is why I'm grateful for you all taking the time and hearing from candidates big and small and learning about what we've got going on. Resume wise, I've always joked that the top line of my resume when it comes to Keizer is Clear Lake Elementary School, Whitaker Middle School, and McNary High School. I've grown up in Keizer and I've lived in the city on and off for various portions of my adult life, and I still have in addition, I still have some other family in the area as well, but Keizer is who I am. It's a city that raised me ever since my parents moved my family there in the mid-90s. And what can I say? It's a community that I've grown very fond of over time. I've been able to document its changes, which I'm grateful for. And I find Keizer is in just a fascinating position right now. When we elect Richard Walsh and Ramiro Navarro to their respective positions, Keizer will have some state house power for arguably the first time in its 40-year history. It will never have been so strongly represented and able to actually make some serious policy changes in Oregon. Keizer is still a very family-friendly place to live. People enjoy the city. They want to be there. Keizer is continuing to find different ways to serve the city. It's expanding facilities like Keizer Rapids Park. It has a local ballot measure on for a new public library. Keizer currently is the largest city in Oregon without a public library. So for those of you residents, I would encourage you all to vote for this proposal, as I am certainly in favor of it. I would love to see a public library in the city. But more than any of that, in its 40th year of existence, Keizer finds itself at an interesting point. As it builds itself up, it has less and less available land and more demand for the homes and residences that exist within city boundaries. Keizer, as a result, is growing at a rate that threatens to bust it at the seams, like a California town circa 2001. There's a serious choice that the city has to face in terms of how it's going to grow, because make no mistake, Keizer will be a bigger city 5 years from now, 10 years from now than it is today. And I'm running in large part because I see a prosperous vision for Keizer, and not just from the wealthiest citizens, not just for the citizens that currently own land, but for everyone up and down the spectrum, individuals of modest means, children, senior citizens, individuals of all races and creeds. There is all a place for them in Keizer, and Keizer has the resources to be a welcoming community for all of them. My job, as I see it, as a city councilor, would be to ensure that those resources are directed toward people, toward the broadest swath of people, while also reinforcing notions of sustainability and community. Keizer is going to have to make serious choices about its infrastructure, how people move around the city, where it is that people go to consume city services, use different facilities. These are all massive questions that the city in some ways hasn't even tackled yet. In the next couple of years, they will become increasingly urgent, and eventually the city will run out of time to act. Now is the moment to be proactive, and it's a moment I wanted to be a part of, and that's why I chose to run. And I have been grateful. I'm grateful for all the support that I received to initially qualify for the ballot. it was a turnaround time of little under 2 weeks, and I managed to get my 120 plus signatures. So that was wonderful. A couple of the volunteers who assisted me are on this call, and I'm grateful for your support. And I look forward to continuing to reach out, represent, and learn some new things. I certainly can't claim to know all the answers about Keizer, but I've learned an awful lot growing up in the city, and even now as a candidate for city council. I'm grateful for all that experience.
That's cool. Thanks, Robert. I have a quick question that kind of ties the first section to the next section, which is Q&A. What other experiences have you had that you feel kind of like helped prepare you for this? Have you served on other committees or things like that, or your daytime job? Is it relevant to this kind of a leadership role?
Yeah, I think my daytime job and my education are especially relevant. I have a master's in business administration from Willamette University, so I got to stay local for my graduate degree, concentrated in finance there. So I definitely expect to be heavily involved in the numbers with respect to Keizer City finances and budgeting. I also understand there's going to be a strategic planning effort for the city of Keizer that will be undertaken next spring. Again, assuming I'm elected to that, I would definitely be able to contribute there. My daytime job is with Nike. I work as a data analyst in their supply chain organization. I cannot speak too closely to what it is that I work on, unfortunately. I have signed a bunch of contracts to that effect, but what I can say, Bernie, about my job is that they hire me to look at systems, tear them apart, find what's broken, and propose fixes. And that's definitely something that I think could translate to the operation of a city.
For sure, for sure. With that, let's open it up more broadly for questions. I realize this is a local race related to Keizer, but as we kind of help prepare Robert for the journey ahead, if there are other questions people have that might help him too, let's feel free to answer questions in that regard. Robert, you were running for a House position, right?
Yeah, I ran against RJ for a House position back in primary season,
Okay.
back in May.
Okay.
And then I'll be honest, Bernie, life changed an awful lot in the past 4 months.
It does sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, the world has generally changed it in the past 4 months, but definitely on the macro and the micro levels, it's just amazing what all has occurred between May and September. Even I think the political environment is slightly different, which
Yeah.
I couldn't believe I'm saying that effectively.
Yeah. Well, I'm
But
glad it looks like you're going to be well positioned to get this position. Aileen,
Am I unmuted?
yes,
Oh, good.
you're good.
Anyway, this is about the urban growth boundary. If it's deemed necessary to expand your urban growth boundary, where? What direction are you going to go? Because there's primo farmland on two sides.
mhm. I live in the north of Keizer, and so I'd be lying if I didn't look around and see all the farmland that I would drive by or bike by in the north of town. And that's certainly an area that I can see the city expanding to. West of some of the current city boundaries, I am interested in, but cautiously, because I do worry about the floodplain. Essentially, I remember the Great Flood of '96. I was just in elementary school then at Clear Lake, but I remember seeing Claggett Creek overflow its banks in certain places within the city, and I want to ensure that Keizer lasts for 150 years, certainly within its built environment. I want to make sure that floodwaters go where they can go and people are not necessarily disturbed. I do think, Aileen, with respect to the urban growth boundary, though, Keizer has a lot to answer for regarding what types of housing, what types of commercial buildings, what types of services fit within the urban growth boundary. I do not get the sense that those are very settled questions. And I welcome some community input on that, definitely, because to me, the city almost can get as big as it wants to, right? People definitely are drawn to the area, attracted to the area. The question, I guess, is what sort of residential situations are they attracted to? Keizer is primarily a city of single family homes, but in recent years, more and more apartment buildings have been built. The look of the city has changed a little bit as a result of that. And I'm curious how other citizens feel when they see some of the recent construction that has gone on, and when they see the pain of low vacancy rates for rentals, as one example within the region. If the I go on Zillow occasionally to check and see how Keizer's real estate market's doing. Not a lot of homes for sale, and I completely understand why. It's a popular place to live, and the urban growth boundary is going to account for that in a hurry.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I request is if it does come to a question of the urban growth boundary, when you're in there, if you would please call Brian Clem and discuss it with him, because he's been studying this and cares about it a lot.
I'd like to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And Robert, I'd also advise you to keep in touch with Aileen. She lives out in Turner. She knows a lot about land use. She has been involved in that issue for several years. We'll just leave it at that.
Several.
But
Wonderful.
she's really very knowledgeable in that area, and it's definitely in Keizer's future for sure. Marcia.
Thanks.
I would just point out that one of the other things before looking to expand the urban growth boundary is to do infill. As I've seen Keizer grow. I did a political campaign. I don't want to admit, but it was in 1984 in Keizer, and so I know it pretty well. I don't live in Keizer, but there are many, many places where there can be infill for things like apartment complexes or duplexes. I drive by Lock Haven and see that whole little triangle right past that intersection. I believe there are still cows and horses in parts on Chimawa Road. And looking at infill, I was on a City of Salem planning thing in the mid-90s because of being on the transit district, and 70% of the folks that we interviewed did not want to expand the urban growth boundary because they understand the limits of farmland and what happened to California and the orange groves and everything else. So that's one of the things that you can think about for expansion would be that.
Absolutely, Marcia. And there are some good examples, not even just on bare land. You see what the city of Portland has been doing, other cities around Oregon with ADU programs. In Keizer, that would make a ton of sense with respect to some alley access, lot sizes, other opportunities. Infill definitely is not going to take just the single family home shape. It's not just going to take the apartment shape. It's going to take a mix of different residential facilities for everybody. And they could be literal residential facilities. Certainly there could be another Avamere, St. Bonaventure, something to come into Keizer in the future. These are these all seem like fair game to me, to be frank. The city is not necessarily settled in what it's going to look like 10 years from now. And exciting opportunity to be sure, but I think the more responsible way to go is to allow for a few different types of housing in the area.
Cool. Thank you. Joyce.
Along the same line, it sounds to me like you are in favor of expanding out beyond the urban growth boundary rather than going up. Is that correct?
I would not necessarily say that's correct on a blanket level. I would have to do some research with respect to how the urban growth boundary can expand, because obviously that would require expansion of city services, city infrastructure, and other elements. And I have some significant questions about how Keizer is serving citizens with the infrastructure. So basically, if the city does expand out to the farmland, it what sort of infrastructure is coming with it, and what are the consequences of developing that out, especially with transportation. More new roads, potentially busy roads. All of a sudden, River Road, especially in the north part of town, as I've described, that would get a ton busier. What does that look like with respect to bus service, individual cars? If there's commercial development, are semis rolling through town? What does that look like? I think there's a lot to answer in that regard.
Cool. Before I call on Kathy Lincoln with her question, I just wanted to dispel the rumor that we're really closet twins because we're wearing the same shirt. That's just a coincidence, everybody. It's a total coincidence. Just wanted to clear the air of that. Didn't want to start any controversies. Okay, Kathy Lincoln.
Thank you. Robert, what is your feeling about the lawsuit that Keizer recently joined with Springfield and Grants Pass and some other cities against LCDC regarding their rules? They recently issued rules about parking spaces and conduits for transit and tree trimming.
I haven't necessarily read anything issued by the city of Keizer to that regard, Kathy. With respect to parking rules, what I do see are more and more cities going away from mandated parking requirements. And I think that is absolutely a positive step in a way that we are going to mitigate the climate crisis in this country. Keizer needs to be a place where you don't have to drive everywhere and you don't have to enter a polluting vehicle to get every single one of your needs met. The city's very calm, it's pretty flat. You can get from one end to the other in less than an hour's time, even if you're hoofing it. And the city should be accommodating to all types of people. There's some statistic I've seen, something like a third of Oregonians don't even own a car. I don't know the precise percentage of that in population in Keizer, Kathy, but I would imagine even if Keizer falls along those similar trend lines, it is the city really serving that population. And so while I must admit I have not seen the specifics of Keizer's argument against DLCD within this lawsuit, I question what the thought is of some of those proponents with regard to how they're serving all their residents who don't necessarily have driver's licenses, can't drive, or choose not to drive.
Is there any other question behind that, Kathy?
No, I agree. I think it's a fruitless, money-wasting venture. So thank you, Robert, for supporting those rules.
Yeah, of course, Kathy. I mean, here's what I think too. A lot of people hear these out as you have to drive or you can never drive. And it's just a frivolous argument meant to rile up people at the end of the day. Of course, nobody is going to go out and demand confiscation of cars and trucks or anything like that. That's not realistic. And at least a third of Keizer residents are commuting up to Portland or Washington County anyway. If they had to give up their cars, I'm sure they'd be irate, but there are a lot of positive developments in terms of services going in. Chariot's putting in the ADX was a massive step for the community. I've been talking to Ian Davidson on the Chariot's board, and he knows how I feel that they do a lot of good within the community, but they always can do better. There are opportunities to make those short trips that are just a few miles or fewer easier to do without a car. And that's for anybody of any mobility level. Keizer can be as friendly to people who are not behind the wheel of a car as it wants to be. And I do think that will unlock a lot of positivity within the community, not just from a sheer climate standpoint, making the air a little more breathable, the surroundings a little less noisy, but it'll genuinely help people see the community in a different light, connect with Keizer in a way that it hasn't necessarily before.
Cool. I have a clarification question, Robert.
Please,
What
yes.
is DLCD? I don't recognize that. Department of what? What does that stand for?
DLCD,
Or Kathy can probably answer that.
Department of Land Conservation and Development. They're
Okay.
the ones who draft and enforce the land use rules.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wasn't recognized with that acronym. Thank you. We're
Yeah.
constantly learning here, Robert. I'm constantly learning.
Oh, we're all constantly learning. Marcia brings up a nice point of the commuter rail. I believe that's the West Side Extension Service that Mitch Greenlick, the late state representative, proposed from extending where it currently goes, Beaverton to Wilsonville, all the way down to Salem.
The West.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing about that proposal, extending the west down to Salem, is that people have dusted that one back off. That appears to be it still has a lot of room to maneuver as far as a viable, actionable build out, but people believe in the idea anymore, and that's just a wonderful idea, frankly. Washington County is only going to get bigger, especially if you look at recent commercial real estate trends where companies are moving offices out of downtown Portland and into Tiger, Tualatin, Beaverton, and Hillsborough. There are a lot of potential points of connection that Keizer can make with Washington County as time goes on, and rail is back in the conversation. It's a part of those opportunities, and I definitely welcome the conversation. I think it could potentially be a huge benefit to the region.
Yeah. All right. So can you give us like a good 3 or 4 minute closing statement, even though we won't all get to vote for you, but if we were to talk to our other friends in Keizer, tell us why they should be voting for you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I really appreciate you all taking the time out, listening to the Democratic candidates, big and small, talking about the issues from the local to the state to the national. These all definitely add up, and to shamelessly borrow from the phrase, all politics is local. Running for Keizer City Council means all these issues definitely come down to the lowest levels, and for it, it's greatly appreciated. I believe that why people should vote for me is because I intend to advance that progressive vision for Keizer. I intend to advance the notion that there should be no one way to navigate a city, that a city can be welcoming to all ages, all races, all creeds, all pockets of life. I believe the city should have opportunities to access greater resources for itself and be a part of a stronger conversation, which is what a public library will ultimately give the city of Keizer. I believe that Keizer doesn't have to go full on Tom McCall or full on nativist. People can come, live, stay, go, do whatever they choose. What I want them to believe is that when they enter the city of Keizer, that it's a clean, safe, peaceful place, a place that they enjoy spending time in, and a place that they may be willing to visit and utilize a local service or frequent a local business if they so choose. Keizer has no reason to close itself off from any part of the world right now. It should stay open to everyone who can come through, and it should stay open to opportunities, because the city has had a fine 40 years. It's turned into things that I think were maybe even beyond its founders' wildest dreams a little bit with what growth has gone on, and more opportunity and more positive developments await the city. I definitely harbor a lot of optimism for Keizer, and I do want to bring that forward in my work with the Keizer City Council. You have to vote for me to get that to happen, of course, but I would nevertheless appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Robert, for being with us. Good luck with your campaign. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the questions. Great to hear from everybody.